He said, I guess you're wondering why you're here. And I said, yes. And they said, Joe Connell and Olga were murdered last night at their house. And I just didn't believe it. I still don't believe it.
I just heard arguing, and the last thing I heard was what the and then 3 gunshots.
Witnesses told police they heard men shouting and then the gunshots outside this building in the Paladin Club Apartments in the early hours of Sunday morning. 39-year-old Joe Connell and his wife Olga, married just a few months, killed outside on the front steps.
In the early morning hours on September 22nd, 2013, our family received the most devastating news we could ever have imagined. Our lives were changed forever. One by one, we crumbled as we found out Joey and his wife Olga were brutally murdered.
Accusing me of sending numerous threatening texts to his wife.
Joseph Connell, he met Olga online, and Olga resided in Russia. When the two first started talking, they hit it off instantly, and Olga ended up moving to Delaware. And when I say these two hit it off, like everyone around them just knew. Like, you know those couples that you're like, like everyone knew these two were legitimately happy. 2 years after dating each other, they decided to get married. Olga, she started working at Macy's, at a jewelry counter, and she was like super financially independent. And Joey, he owned a C&S automotive repair shop, and he partnered up with Chris Rivers, which was his friend for years. After knowing each other for 2 years and saying I do, this couple only they were newlyweds before they were murdered. September 22nd of 2013, Joseph and Olga, they went out to celebrate Olga's 39th birthday. They stayed out late, they were drinking, and then when they arrived back, there was someone waiting for them.
911, what's your emergency?
My neighbor is laying on the ground. She's hurt. She has blood all over her body.
When neighbors heard gunshots, one of the reports was that they saw 2 men. When the cops arrived to the scene, whether you are a detective or what, there was one thing that was very clear. Someone specifically targeted those 2 because Joey, he had a wallet which had about like $100 in it, and Olga was still wearing her wedding ring, and mind you, that was diamond. So the question everyone was asking was like, who hated these people so much that they didn't just kill Joey, they didn't just kill Olga, they killed both of them. Now, unfortunately, the first suspect ended up being Kelly, Joe's sister. The reason being is because Kelly was really upset with Joey. She didn't even attend his own wedding. The reason why Kelly was so upset was because of their mother, Millicent, gave Kelly a ring that was now Olga's. Let me explain. So the whole family, they're a family of 5. You have John, who's the oldest, then you have Joseph, and you have Kelly. Now the parents, they divorced. In my opinion, I feel like if my parents got a divorce, then I probably don't want the ring because that's like a bad omen ring. But anyways, their mother, Millicent, gave this ring to Kelly. But once Joey and Olga got together, and Millicent saw how just happy those 2 were together, the mom actually took the ring back from Kelly, like Mother of the Year. That first off, you're not really supposed to give the ring to the daughter, you're supposed to give the ring to the son, so he gives it to, anyways, it really doesn't matter. Every family is different, but this family is specifically different because the mother never really illustrated any sympathy towards Kelly regarding this ring. She just took it back and gave it to Olga. And on the wedding day, which Kelly did not attend, Kelly ends up calling up Joey before they all walk down the aisle saying, you better give me back that ring. And he's just like, no. Olga finds out about this and actually ends up crying on her wedding day. The police was also suspicious of Kelly because before the Newlyeds died, someone broke into their home and stole their jewelry. Even Joey believed at the time it was his own sister. And it does make sense that, if Kelly was this angry about a ring, it would make sense for her to be a suspect. But for Millicent to also believe that her own daughter would kill her own brother, I don't know, you must think that your daughter has the potential to do something like this. And if you really think about it, if Millicent, the mother, is saying, yeah, it's definitely possible that Kelly, my own daughter, did this. If Joey thought that Kelly broke into their home to basically get the ring, then why wouldn't the police think that?
Recently, him and I were not talking. He hated me. My brother was very, very, very irate to me. From that moment on, you can read his text. From that moment on, my brother was pure evil to me, accusing me of sending numerous threatening texts to his wife. Are you guys looking at me or something?
No, we're just trying to get, like I said, we're just trying to get as much information as we can.
I didn't do that robbery, and I don't want to be pregnant to my brother.
No, I'm not saying that you did.
So as you can see, Kelly obviously knew that she was going to be the suspect, and the police actually brought her back in again to question her, but they never really got anywhere, and the police had a decision to make. Do we think Kelly did this, or should we be looking elsewhere, like Joey's partner, Chris Rivers? The interviewer and the people that were watching this interview, they did question why Chris wasn't like, where is Joey? Why are you asking me about Joey? Like, usually that's the first question people ask. But the reason why Chris' reaction was more like, what did Joey do now? Is because he told the cops that Joey was selling steroids at their business. And take a listen.
What? So I searched the shop, found him, and said to him, get him out. I don't want it here. I'm not losing the frickin' place over this bull.
What was he selling?
Steroids.
So the cops were able to verify this information and say that this was true. That Joseph Connell not only was doing well in his business, because his business, it did, $1 million in sales. This business was doing amazing, but he was also selling steroids. After their interview with Chris Rivers, the authorities, they secured a search warrant for the business. There they found unsubscribed steroids, and they arrested Chris Rivers because, that's his business. Now, the reason they actually arrested him was because Chris told the police that he was supposed to meet Joe and Olga to celebrate Olga's birthday, but he forgot his ID. But in this interview, take a listen to what he says.
Figures you see somebody every day, 12 hours a day, more than you see your wife. So we were pretty much best friends.
When was the last thing you did together? When was the last time you saw him?
I was together Friday with him. And then Saturday I was supposed to meet him down with everybody at the bar. He's a great guy. There's nothing that he would ever do to make anybody angry, ever.
How'd they tell you he was killed?
They didn't at first. They asked me a bunch of questions, and I had no clue why I was there. And
they wouldn't tell you?
No.
Why'd you go with them?
I figured it had something to do with, I don't know. I just went. I've never been in trouble before. I just kind of went along with what they said.
What did they say?
They just said I need to come down to Newcastle County and talk to them. All kinds of questions. I don't remember exactly what they were asking, but pretty much everybody he knew, they were asking him. All kinds of questions.
Pretty much.
I was just asking questions about everybody he knew, our friends, every friend, but they never led to believe anything like that. Before you go any further, he said, I guess you're wondering why you're here, and I said, yes, and they said, Joe Connell and Olga were murdered last night at their house, and I just didn't believe it. I still don't believe it. I gave them the surveillance. I have surveillance at the house and the shop. They took all that. They have all that.
That before they told you he was killed?
No. After. I told them they could have it. They could come.
Did he tell you how he was killed?
No, they didn't tell me anything. We found drugs in your building. Joe's dead. You're responsible.
For what? The drugs or his death?
The drugs.
Did you ever mess with steroids?
Does it look like
Well,
I
when
have?
I looked at the picture on Facebook, I said, that guy, was Joe bulked up? Joe
I'd rather
lift
not
weights?
answer that question, but I'm
Did he
sure.
lift weights?
I'd rather not answer that question.
Now, your lawyer's already said apparently his partner is, I mean...
I'm not going to badmouth my best friend.
But your lawyer's already said apparently his partner was dabbling in steroids. I'm going to ask, did you know anything about him in steroids?
I'd rather not answer that.
Did you know that there were steroids in the building?
No. Absolutely not.
Did you do anything that night? Did you go out anywhere?
I was at work and then I went straight out.
At 11, I went down there. It was around 10:30. But I didn't have my ID on me, so I had to drive all the way home.
Did you do anything that night? Did you go out anywhere?
I was at work and then I went straight out.
Then a question remains, why would Chris lie about his whereabouts that night? Why would he tell the interviewer that he was getting McDonald's, etc., and went back home, but then told the police something completely different? The police wasn't buying what Chris Rivers was selling. And they also learned that Chris Rivers, he was in so much debt. He was using cocaine, opioids, but they also found that Joey took out $1 million life insurance policy. And now things were starting to come together, that it wasn't Kelly who was upset about this ring, that it's starting to look like Chris because he actually has a real motive, $1 million. And it's making sense that if Olga survived this tragedy, that she would also be entitled to that $1 million insurance policy. Now, there also was a theory that Olga was part of like the Russian mob and maybe they had something to do with this. And the police found zero evidence illustrating any of this happened because Olga was very financially independent. You know, her father would send her money. She was also working at Macy's. She invested in stocks. She was a very smart financial person. Olga was a huge reason to why CNS was a success. She knew how to make money. She knew how to make customers spend money and to make them happy. She was like trained in that. People trusted that CNS would do a really great job with their cars, fixing whatever needed to be repaired, hugely because of Olga. And when the authorities looked into her past, they found out that she was married before, and they actually interviewed her ex-husband to see if he had anything to do with this. It turns out that Olga was a mail-ordered bride, and that's pretty much where, like, these sites say that you're not paying for a bride. They say that you're paying for, like, you know, going on a date or a vacation, whatever, with that person, whatever. Either way, like how they're selling it, you're literally just paying for a bride. And I couldn't help but wonder if that's how Joey and Olga met, but it doesn't matter because those two seem pretty happy and to each their own. When the authorities arrested Chris Rivers, you know, he wasn't talking to them again. He lawyered up for smart reasons. But everything was still somewhat circumstantial. There wasn't like any legitimate proof until they looked at his phone records. When the police looked at Chris Rivers' phone records, they discovered that he was, as he was talking to Joey that he was going to come on down and buy a drink while they were celebrating Olga's 39th birthday, he was also talking to a Joshua Bay. Police discovered that Joshua Bay has been at the CNS shop, and then they also started looking at his phone records. What they noticed was Joshua Bay at that time was not only talking to Chris Rivers, but was also talking to two men, Aaron Thompson and Dominique Benson. They were starting to put the puzzles together. The neighbors, when they heard the gunshots, they said that they saw two men, and Joshua just happens to be talking to two men at that time when the shooting occurred. And for a lesser sentence, I assume Joshua told the police everything.
So how is it that you came to know Chris Rivers?
I bought a car probably in the summertime of 2011. So like I'll pay anything to keep them out of the way, get them going, get them going. Showing me all these texts about, you know, him and his sister, Joe's sister. So he's like, yo, it gotta happen now. It's perfect.
When did you first figure out that the deed was actually done?
In the morning, he called me up, Dominique called me up and told me, go collect the money.
And followed by him, Dominique and Aaron Thompson did the same thing. So at the business, Chris asked Joshua if he could kill Joey and Olga. In exchange, Chris would give him $60,000, and so Joshua hired 2 hitmen. After this huge piece of information, Chris Rivers was arrested at the CNS Automotive Repair Shop. And there was really no surprise. The authorities say that he knew it was coming, just a matter of time.
And who portrayed himself as the grieving friend after his business partners were found dead will now spend the rest of his life in prison for their murders.
Rivers was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life plus 50 years in prison. Joshua Bay pleaded guilty to first-degree conspiracy, and Aaron Thompson got life for pulling the trigger, and Dominique Benson was sentenced to 5 years for conspiracy. So overall, this murder was all for money, you know? So Olga and Joseph Connell, they were murdered for drugs and money. Because when you really think about it, Chris Rivers, the only reason why he was in so much debt and needed money was because he was doing drugs. If it wasn't for his addiction, maybe he wouldn't have felt like the only way he could get money was to murder people. And I also feel sorry for Joey and Kelly, for the family that they're in. This family just seems to never stop fighting. Even in 2014, the parents were fighting over Joseph's assets. And it's like, guys, your son isn't alive anymore. Give it a rest. And after all of this, you know, we see exactly what happened, how everything turned to murder. And even though the evidence is like right in front of us about what transpired, what had to happen for Joseph and Olga Connell to be murdered, there are moments where we sit there and we still just ask ourselves, why?